Well, is empathy a sin? No. I can't believe we're even having to make this video. I'm Reverend Kevin Hackney. I'm a minister in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the ELCA. So, a lot of Christians right now are saying how bad empathy is and how sinful it is. And we also have politicians doing this. And I think it's because politicians are doing things in a way that it's not so much what is being done, but how it's being done that Jesus would agree with. And I think it's dangerous because what happens if we get rid of empathy? Well, if we get rid of empathy, then we get rid of mercy. Because empathy is not a feeling, it's a process. It's part of the path to get to mercy. So if you don't have it, there is no mercy. And Jesus made it very clear that there is mercy in the law. So if you've removed mercy from the law, then I'm sorry, you're not following what God's will is. You know, avoiding being in somebody else's shoes doesn't make you more righteous. And I think it does the opposite. It makes us what Jesus exactly warned us against and warned us to not be like. And so I just want to know if Jesus really wanted us to do this, then why did he do the opposite? And let's go into that. So, one of the shortest verses in the Bible, the one that I do not allow any student to ever use as their main verse because it's so short, because you have to memorize it in the Lutheran Church, is Jesus wept. See, Jesus didn't just speak the truth, he felt it. And this is coming from Lazarus. So, for those that are not aware of what he did, Lazarus was dead. I mean, he wasn't just dead, he was so dead that he stunk. That's how dead he was. He's been dead for days. And for those of us that know Jesus, we know that he could have just raised him and said, "Hey, Mary, watch this." But he didn't. He didn't just go in there and do his miracle. He took time. He stood there in grief with her, and he wept, and he felt her sorrow. And that's where we get the shortest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. So if this empathy of Jesus was sinful, then Jesus would have rebuked her for crying with her. He would have said, "Don't do that. Crying is wrong." And so then we go to the widow's son. So the other one is when the widow loses her son. And you're going to be like, well, why is that such a big deal? Because back in the Roman Empire days, women couldn't work. Women were dependent on their husband and their sons. And if she has no husband, because she's a widow, and she has no sons, that means she's going to be out on the street. And so she's grieving, and Jesus sees her, and he's moved by her compassion. He doesn't just restore her son, he feels her pain first. And that's one of the things I think people don't realize is that Jesus really felt people's pain deeply inside. And so truth without empathy is very empty. And Jesus never just told people, do the right thing. He felt the suffering before he ever acted. And now we have the whole answer to this whole thing, the Good Samaritan. So, when we are talking about the Good Samaritan, how did all this happen? Well, there's a dying man in the road. And who goes by him? We have somebody that works at the temple and somebody that leads worship at the temple, and they just skip him. These are the people that are supposed to be following God's law. Then the outsider is the one who actually helps. And he's the one that said that I'm going to help. And then Jesus tells us to be like this man. And so if empathy is a sin, why did Jesus have us do this? It makes no sense. So why does this matter? Justice without empathy is cruelty. A judge who sees only laws and not people becomes a tyrant. Justice without empathy isn't justice, it's just punishment. And here's the thing is mercy without empathy It doesn't feel like mercy, does it? It feels hollow. And this is what happens when a doctor starts seeing their patients as numbers. And they just try their best to heal people, but they don't even look at them. And this also happens when we try to do good works, but we don't really care about who we help. And the question is that really mercy? The Pharisees were the ones that had all the answers, but, they did everything wrong. And so if your faith makes you colder towards suffering, then something is deeply wrong. And so this gives us back to, what does Jesus say about the law? And I think a lot of people ignore this completely. Jesus says there's 3 things that we have to have in the law. And I'm going to quote him before we start. You neglect the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. And he's talking to the Pharisees. And so if you don't do this, you're basically a Pharisee. If you remove justice, you get lawlessness. If you remove faith, you get self-righteousness, and I think that's happening. If you remove mercy, the whole thing collapses, because without empathy, mercy doesn't exist. And without mercy, the whole thing collapses. And so the real danger we have here is self-righteousness. It's almost like people want to violate the first commandment and become their own God. That they don't care what God said anymore. I'm God. And that is really what's at the core here, and why people want to get rid of mercy. I'm going to be blunt. The villains in the story are the priests and the people that worked in the temple and the people that shared the law, because they were not doing what they were supposed to do. Now, before we move on, we want to make it clear that not all of them were this blind. I mean, there's a couple in the Bible that we know came around, but Jesus made them the villains for a reason. It's not because they really were villains. It's because this is not what he wants us to do. And I just want to go back to what we started with. If rejecting empathy makes us better Christians, then why on earth didn't Jesus Christ act that way?